In a small, forgotten town nestled deep within a valley, there lived a man named Silas. He wasn't a bad man, not really. He was a simple baker, known for his warm bread and even warmer smile. But deep inside Silas, a tiny seed of greed had taken root. It started small, as these things often do. He'd add a little extra water to his dough to save on flour, or charge a few extra pennies to the weary travelers passing through, figuring they wouldn't know the difference. No one noticed, or if they did, they said nothing. The seed was watered by his small successes, and it began to grow. One day, a rumor swept through the town like wildfire. A treasure, hidden by a long-dead king, was said to be buried somewhere in the whispering woods that bordered their valley. The legend spoke of mountains of gold, jewels the size of a man's fist, and artifacts of immense power. Most townsfolk dismissed it as an old wives' tale, a story to tell children at night. But for Silas, the story was not a tale. It was a promise. The seed of greed in his heart sprouted, its thorny vines wrapping around his thoughts until he could think of nothing else. He started spending his days not by the warm glow of his oven, but in the dusty corner of the town library, poring over ancient maps and forgotten lore. His bakery, once the heart of the town, fell silent. The fire in his oven went cold. His customers, once greeted with a cheerful smile, were now met with a locked door. Silas grew thin, his eyes hollow, but they burned with a feverish light. He neglected his friends, his home, and himself, all for the phantom glint of gold. His old friend, a gentle carpenter named Elias, tried to reason with him. "Silas," he'd say, "what has become of you? Your life is here, with us. This treasure is a ghost. You're chasing a shadow." But Silas would just wave a dismissive hand, his eyes never leaving the crinkled map spread before him. "You don't understand, Elias," he'd mutter. "This is my chance to be more than just a baker. My chance to have everything." The greed had become a hunger that no amount of bread could ever satisfy. After weeks of relentless searching, Silas found it. A hidden symbol on a moss-covered stone, just as the ancient texts described. His heart hammered against his ribs as he dug, his hands raw and bleeding. Finally, his shovel struck something hard, not a stone but wood, a chest. He heaved it from the earth, his breath catching in his throat. It was ancient, bound in iron, and impossibly heavy. He dragged it back to his now derelict bakery under the cloak of darkness. He didn't want anyone to see, to know. This treasure was his and his alone. With trembling hands, he broke the lock. The lid creaked open and Silas gasped. It was real, everything the legends promised and more. Gold coins overflowed, shimmering in the moonlight that streamed through his dusty window. Rubies, emeralds, and diamonds sparkled, casting a rainbow of colors across the room. For a moment, pure joy washed over him. He ran his hands through the coins, letting them cascade through his fingers. He laughed, a wild, unrestrained sound he hadn't made in months. He was rich, he was powerful. He had everything he ever wanted. But then a strange thing happened. As he held a magnificent golden chalice, he noticed his reflection. The face staring back wasn't his own. It was gaunt, twisted, the eyes wide with a desperate, insatiable hunger. He looked at his hands, and they seemed thin and claw-like, clutching the gold as if their very life depended on it. A cold dread began to creep into his heart, colder than the metal he was holding. He tried to ignore it. He spent the next few days in his bakery, counting and recounting his treasure. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep. He just sat there, surrounded by his wealth, a king on a throne of gold in a kingdom of dust and cobwebs. He'd occasionally peer out his window, watching the townsfolk go about their lives. He saw Elias laughing with a customer, the baker's apprentice who had taken over the town's bread, making sharing a fresh loaf with a child. He saw community, warmth, life, and he felt nothing but a hollow ache. The gold, which had promised everything, had given him nothing but emptiness. The joy of its discovery was fleeting, replaced by a constant, gnawing anxiety. What if someone found out? What if they tried to steal it? Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow that danced on the wall, sent a jolt of panic through him. He became a prisoner in his own home, chained by the very treasure that was meant to set him free. One night, a storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest in his soul. He was staring at the pile of gold when he saw it again, his reflection in a polished shield. But this time it was worse. The face was skeletal, the eyes empty sockets, and yet they still burned with that same terrible greed. He recoiled in horror, stumbling backward. The treasure was not just gold and jewels, it was a curse. It fed on his greed, and in return it was consuming him, hollowing him out from the inside. He realized the legend was incomplete. It spoke of the king who hid the treasure, but not why. Now Silas knew. The king hadn't hidden it for safekeeping. He had buried it to be free of it. The treasure didn't bring wealth. It brought a slow, agonizing death of the soul. In a moment of terrifying clarity, Silas knew what he had to do. He couldn't keep it. He couldn't sell it. He couldn't give it away, for that would only pass the curse to another. It had to be returned. With strength he didn't know he possessed, he nailed the chest shut. He dragged it out into the raging storm, back towards the whispering woods. The journey was a nightmare. The chest seemed heavier than before, as if weighted down by all his regrets. The wind howled, and the trees seemed to twist into accusing shapes. Every step was a battle against his own greed, which screamed at him to turn back, to keep the glittering prize. He finally reached the hole where he'd found the chest. He was exhausted, soaked to the bone, but a strange sense of peace began to settle over him. He pushed the chest back into the muddy earth. With his bare hands he began to shovel the dirt back in, burying the curse, burying his greed. As the last pile of dirt covered the chest, the storm began to subside. Silas collapsed, weeping. Not for the lost gold, but for the lost time, the lost friendships, the lost self. He had chased a mountain of gold and had almost lost his soul. He walked back to town as the sun began to rise. The light felt different, warmer. The air smelled of rain and fresh earth, not dust and old metal. He looked at his hands. They were dirty and scraped, but they were his hands again, a baker's hands. He walked to his old bakery. The fire was out, the place a mess. But it was his? He began to clean, sweeping away the dust and the shadows of the past weeks. He found his old apron, rekindled the fire in his oven, and with the last of his flour, he began to bake. The familiar rhythm of kneading the dough was comforting, a prayer of repentance. Silas smiled back, his eyes welling with tears. He hadn't found a mountain of gold, but he had found something infinitely more valuable. He had found his way back. He had learned that true wealth isn't something you can dig up from the ground. It's something you build, day by day, with your own two hands, and share with the people around you. The seed of greed had been uprooted, and in its place a small, fragile seed of gratitude had begun to grow. And Silas knew this was a treasure he would never, ever let go of. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that make you think. See you next time.